started. I know we go back in at 2 on the floor, and I'm not sure what the Senate's schedule is, but we'll try to be efficient with our time here. I think we left off, we were talking about now 2 bills, 2597 and 2106. And I'd like to start off with our details on 2597. After further discussion, the House would like to offer to accept the NOL provisions, net operating loss, carry back, carry forward. At this time, we would decline the worker WOTC and the ERC. I can never remember what those acronyms stand for, but at this time, I think there was just a little bit too much in play. I did speak with the Department of Revenue, and it's not that we need to wait 24 hours to get those numbers. It's there's so many issues that are in fact unknown until we get the numbers from the federal government, which could be, months out, even 18 months before we're really certain on where those stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that. I'm asking that you not take it off the table yet at this point, if you just keep it in consideration. I get the unknowns, but I would just like to see where we land with the final.
I would agree to that. I'll leave it on the table.
Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated.
I also wanted to take a look at the Social Security income and the retirement income. When we left last, we were going to have the research department do some work on that. And if Eddie's ready, I would, you want to review some of that information that you
we don't have numbers yet on what we had discussed offline shortly after the last meeting, but I'm happy to describe that concept to the full committee if that's what you're wanting.
I think you'd do a much better job at it than I would, because I've proved multiple times I sometimes don't explain things very well. So
okay, so and I'm actually, I think maybe it'll be beneficial for the entire committee if I back up one step and describe the way that subtraction modification works under current law. Under current law, if the taxpayer's FAG, federal adjusted gross income, is $75,000 or less, then 100% of the Social Security benefits that are federally taxable are exempt from Kansas income tax. As soon as the amount of federal adjusted gross income becomes $75,001, then 100% of the federally taxable Social Security benefits become taxable on the Kansas income tax. House Bill 2727 would change that to where, rather than a sharp drop off from 75,000 to 75,001, it is a graduated drop off from 75,000 to $85,000. The proposal that, and that's done via formulaic manner. If anybody wants to see the details of that formula, there is testimony in the House Tax Committee hearing on 2727 that details that formula. The proposal that I believe the chair is asking me to present is a concept of increasing the $85,000 amount by a specified dollar amount on an annual basis, to where the graduated application of the tax, or the graduated reduction of the subtraction modification, would extend on an annual basis. So in the first year of this, it would be a $10,000 graduation. The second year, it would become a $15,000 or $5,000 is one of the iteration versions that the conference that the chair asked me to look at. It would become a $15,000 in the third year. It would become a $20,000 phase out, and prospectively that cliff would switch to a graduation and a farther along graduation until eventually it would reach a point where effectively all Social Security benefits would be exempt from the income tax. And at that point, or at a certain point where the statute would provide for, it would just switch from a graduation to an outright exemption. Conceptually, and the Department of Revenue's policy and research staff, I believe, are working on fiscal estimates for that type of proposal as we speak.
And so, Madam Chair, if I could just explain my thought process behind that, is as you begin extending that maximum threshold, at some point it's kind of like the law of diminishing returns. At some point, it's it's not going to be as much of a fiscal impact to the state to go ahead and just completely eliminate it, because just by extending the threshold, we never actually eliminate it. But at some point, you know, that fiscal impact is only going to be 10 or 15 million dollars. And at that point, the legislature could go ahead and fully exempt the Social Security income.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, especially where your position was getting rid of the cliff and ours was removing it completely. I think this is, if we can land on the numbers for the fiscal note, this is a great compromise and we both win. I think it's a great win for Kansans. And I would say it's a good thing we have video so that Eddie can demonstrate the slopes for them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we also had some discussion regarding a similar but different approach for the all retirement benefits. And I don't know if, have you had a chance to kind of put numbers together on that, or what does that look like?
Rather than, I'll describe the concept for the retirement plan income. The Senate had a bill from last year that I believe passed its floor twice that would have exempted all retirement plan income. This would have provided for a new subtraction modification to be set at a dollar amount to be still to be determined. I believe was what we left off. That would be double the amount for married filing jointly than what it was for all other taxpayers. And it would, in the first year of the subtraction modification, it would have been that specified dollar amount. And the proposal would provide for a cost of living adjustment, in essence, what the Federal Internal Revenue Code, I believe it's in Section 1F, provides for, to increase that amount by that annual Federal Internal Revenue Code amount prospectively, to where it would initially be the specific dollar amount provided for in statute, but then the amount of that subtraction modification of retirement income would increase on that percentage basis on a year-over-year annually.
So it's a somewhat similar concept, but a different mechanism. And it would probably slow the graduated rate a little bit more to make that fiscal impact much more less impactful on the state revenues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we anticipate fiscal notes maybe later this afternoon?
Similar to the Social Security one, I know the Department of Revenue's research and policy staff is working on that right now. I don't want to try to speculate for them in terms of exactly what time those would be available.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the impression that I get is that this is palatable to both sides. Just we need to land on where we can agree on the fiscal note. Mark them.
Yes, I've been putting circles by mine that
Okay.
that's still in question. So I've got that one circled and we'll come back to that. But I think we are on a path toward agreement there.
Mr. Chairman, we understand the standard deduction that I know we talked about an equation and we requested some information on that. So we may want to come back and visit that. That may be why you didn't sign up 10%. I know you asked earlier and we accepted, but we did ask for an equation off of similar to what the federal government does on the standard deduction.
Adjustment.
Yes, on that. Instead of coming back every year and asking for an increase, maybe take a look at that also if you're receptive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Did you have any chance to discuss or offer on the storefront property tax refund, removing the 33%? I know it sounded like that was a favorable position. I just didn't know if you had any further discussions on that item.
Mr. Chairman, we would definitely entertain that offer of removing the county obligation and using Spark money for it. Are there any other parameters that you would like looked at?
I'm looking at the details of that one. I believe there was a cap on the per business. I think it was 2.5 million, if I remember correctly. And I was just curious if that provision was removed, because we have businesses that might own multiple locations. And if it was one large business, that it doesn't account for each one of those locations, they would be over that $2.5 million limit. I was curious on what that would do to the fiscal note if we had any data on that to remove that cap and go ahead and open it up to businesses that might have multiple locations across the state.
We appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and I would make that request so we'd have that number, and Senator Holland would like to comment to it.
Mr. Chairman, so the background of that is that when I was working with Senator Stephan on putting this together, we had a concern about the fiscal note explicitly, and we wanted to be sure that this money was directed to the smaller partnerships, the sole proprietors, as were. We were less concerned about those large chain food operations specifically, because we figured those guys and gals, the bigger chains, they were having much more easier access to PPP monies and things like that. We wanted to have a program. The program was specifically geared to both rural and urban, basically small business owners who, quite frankly, did not get their shot at the PPP dollars. And that's who we were trying to target that to. That's why we had the limits.
Thank you. And I would add to that, Mr. Chairman, we are receptive to looking at all businesses that were shut down, storefronts. So we appreciate your asking this question. I would definitely entertain looking at removing that cap and making sure that businesses that for each store location, if their property was shut down, they still had to pay property on it. So if we could get those two separate numbers, that would be great. Move forward on that.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that data existed, if we'd have to know what those businesses were, which ones would qualify, or yeah, the data we might be asking for the impossible.
I just want to clarify. So one of you said two separate numbers. One of the numbers would be, my understanding is to eliminate the $2.5 million cap on annual revenues provided for it. What was the second of those?
The second was to make sure that the language is per location, that they could apply per location. So if they own 2 or 3 storefronts, that each location would qualify for the property tax.
So each location would, I think it's a $7,500 limit. So each location would qualify for that maximum. If the, not the maximum amount would probably even be achieved, but each real location would be eligible for that.
That I just want to make sure the clarification on the language. It's been a year since we looked at it. We did send it across the Senate floor again this year in a bill. Location. We just want to make sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I understand where this is going, but one of the questions I had, I guess, would be maybe part of the cap or involved in the legislation would be, did they receive PPP money or a loan? I think it was EOT, whatever those loans. I can see helping small businesses that didn't get any. They didn't apply. They were by the time they applied, the PPP money was gone. I just not sure. I want to help large businesses that have received millions of dollars to be able to access this fund.
Senator Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that's specifically why we had the cap, and specifically because this was my whole perception of this. I have a number of small businesses, and my perception of this is that you had certain much smaller operations, both rural and urban areas, that they didn't get any of the PPP monies. Okay, they just did not get access to that federal assistance, and this is specifically what this was trying to help those businesses with. Okay, and that's why we put some language in there about capping it. And I think there was some reference if you had like assistance from other sources or whatever. We're really trying to get this people that did not have that federal bite at the apple.
Thank you.
So just for clarification, there is language in there, and perhaps I missed that if they've received PPP loans or something. Oh, okay.
No, but there is some specific reference to, I believe, and my apologies to Madam Chair, but I've got to go back and list, but we tried to put some things in there where if they had gotten some sort of aggregate amount of monies that, we were trying to basically limit the folks that already had some other incomes coming in to offset their issues with the COVID shutdown.
Let's see. So, Madam Chair, with that conversation, maybe we could leave that $2.5 million cap in there, but just specify that the $7,500 is per location.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you mind if we get the fiscal notes first before
Certainly.
we make that decision?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I think all the other parameters were good. There is a scale in there for the number of days that you're shut down. You had to be shut down for the entire year in order to qualify for the $7,500. So there's a schedule of reimbursement. As you.
Are there any other provisions that you want to discuss? I had one new one, not a new one, but something else that I had on my notes that I forgot to include. I did want the Senate to possibly consider adding language that we pulled out of 2239, which was House Bill 2186. That was the single factor apportionment. I know it was roughly a $21 million item, and we pulled it out of that previous bill as kind of one of the larger fiscal impact items. Just wanted to make sure that that was in play for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely, we'll keep it in play for consideration.
Where do we stand right now on the child care tax credit? I know that's one that has very good support on both chambers. Is that one that we could come to some agreement on?
I think we can. Would you mind going over the parameters on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There have been a few versions of this child care tax credit. I'm going to go over the one that's in 2237. Is that the one we're referencing?
Yeah, I think that's the one that the Senate had passed. I know House had a 2414 was our version. So the one in play is 2237 as it passed the Senate.
Some of the percentages that are applicable in other bills had changed. This one, sorry.
I may, before you start, maybe we could look at both provisions, because the one that did pass the Senate floor. It wasn't necessarily, I think it was the same language that we had passed out of committee. I just want to make sure that we've got it right.
No, it's not a problem. 2237, the child care credit keeps the current 30% of amounts expended. It's an existing credit for exists, and what this bill does is it adds a new provision for credits for that are amounts expended by a taxpayer as payments to an organization for providing access to available child care services for the taxpayer's employees. It's one of the new provisions. The other substantive new provision would open up the credit to not just corporates, so corporate taxpayers, excuse me. Currently, the credit is limited to only corporate taxpayers, so all income taxpayers would be eligible for the credit starting in tax year 2021.
income tax, anybody that, did you state that last statement?
Sure. Currently, the existing credit's only limited to corporate income tax filers. That provision is discontinued, so it would open the credit up to all income tax filers,
Including individuals?
employers. Excuse me. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
When you said that, I thought it was only businesses. Okay. But a family could form a business and qualify. So thank you.
So that would include like LLCs, any business entity, not just C corps, corporation.
Including sole proprietorship.
I understand that it's based on the employer. So assuming that the sole proprietor was the employer, it's understanding that the provisions would apply.
Thank you. I want to make sure, I thought there was language in one of the bills. That's why I was asking for clarification. One of them was 30% and the other, the first year was a 50% tax credit.
You're correct. It is a 50%. I've 50% amount in this bill.
I believe in the existing language that is not changed in this bill. There's actually conceptually there's a couple different credits happening within this statutory provision. But generally, what's happening is in the year, I'm just looking at the first one that's listed, in the first taxable year in which a facility is established that meets these qualifications for the taxpayer's employees, the credit is 50% of the amount. In the subsequent years, then it goes to 30%. For the question.
Okay. I had concern over the logistics. It incentivizes businesses to jump daycares from year to year to keep it at a 50% tax credit versus a consistent 30%.
Sounds like we might need to make sure we take a little more time to look at that and then understand exactly where we might be going with that before we move forward with that one.
Would be great, Mr. Chairman. So we'll take those offline and do some more research.
Okay. Just looking at the time, are there any other items on 2597 that you'd like to discuss at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I think we're in agreement. I hate to lose the manufacturer's coupon, but we understand some people's concern on the streamlined sales tax. I know that others in the body would like to see us not be a part of that group anymore. So it's 6-1, a half dozen other, but I think we'll save that for another date, another negotiation.
Okay, so we'll strike the manufacturer's coupons at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for considering.
There are are no other items.
Utilities? Mr. Chairman?
That's one that we're still considering in play. Personally, I would like to consider that until we get the entire package complete, look at the fiscal note. If it looks like something that's favorable that we can still move forward with, I'd be more than happy to. But yes, I'm considering that one still in play.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, and we're still looking at food sales tax.
I didn't know if you wanted to have any further discussion on that one, or if you were prepared to.
I don't think we're prepared at this point.
Okay.
I've been asked to hold off for that. Like I said, I really do appreciate, I know many of us do, what the House has offered. There's a little bit of heartburn for a couple of reasons, but we definitely want to consider your offer and give it the due diligence.
Okay. We will pick that up at our next meeting. Do we want to come back at? I want to make sure we have plenty of time to look at these items, give Department of Revenue some time to look at that Social Security and retirement income that we talked about, so we have some good direction there. It says 3:30 acceptable time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the quicker the better, especially since we've been asked to finish these conference committee reports today if possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
3:30.
3:30.
Okay. We will plan on that back in this room if it's available.